Why are we here? Pfizer is a pharmaceutical company, yeah? Life sciences, pills, large molecules. When in fact, our purpose is to deliver breakthroughs that change patients' lives. That can come in the form of a tablet, it can come in the form of an infusion, an injection, but it can also come in the form of technology. We're a 170-year-old company. We've been doing this for a long time in over 150 markets around the world. And we have a rich history of innovation. Up until recently, we would have to look far back in time for really substantial world-changing innovation. Just in the late 1930s, Pfizer was one of the first companies to figure out how to mass-produce penicillin, which was extremely important in 1940 and the years following. Today, you may know us as a company that makes vaccines, yeah? You and hundreds of millions of others have watched as we've developed in partnership the COVID vaccine, but our operations are not only vast in terms of geography, but also in the portfolio of patients that we serve. So we have not only hundreds of millions of patients who've benefited from vaccines, but tens of thousands who are being treated with Pfizer's oncology medications or oncology therapies, both solid tumor and hematological malignancies. We have a rich internal medicine history. Some of you may be familiar with medicines such as Lipitor in the late 90s, Viagra, and now we have lots of other new entrants into the market, products for migraines, products, anticoagulants, a real rich set of therapies. Beyond the COVID vaccine, we have others, of course, but we also have tens of thousands of patients benefiting from our work in dermatological inflammation, gastrointestinal inflammation, rheumatology, and we're also very proud of our history in rare disease. It's just as recently as a few days ago made a big acquisition that we think will result in our ability to bring game-changing medicines in sickle cell, for instance. So that's all fine and good, but why are we here? I used this line the last time, around the last time I attended a Frontiers event. So it was 2019. We were all speaking very closely together. Nobody had masks. Everybody was shaking hands. It was a jovial affair in Berlin. But the underlying theme was very much what's on the slide here. We all went home from that event, and as you'll go home from that event today, you'll get in your car, perhaps you'll use Waze, right? So you have an app that's in your life. It's delivering information from 180 million users in real time to guide you to where to turn left, where to turn right, how to get home fastest, not just generally, but in that moment, given the weather conditions, given the traffic conditions, sort of massive personalization. You'll get home. Your thermostat may know what you prefer. Do you like it cooler? Do you like it warmer? And then, of course, you'll sit down in front of your TV, and Amazon, 85% of the time, will tell you what to watch. So as consumers, we've gotten pretty hip to digital. Not so much so from a healthcare perspective, right? Certainly it's changed. In 2019, I'd say that we were in a very different place than we are today in 2022. But largely, you know, this quote from William Gibson still stands. The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. And in healthcare, we've had some significant gaps. I'm enthusiastic about the progress we've been able to make over the last 3-5 years, and I'm really looking forward to the next 3 or 5 years. And that's sort of how we look at things. So if you think about sort of where we've been recently, I'm from San Diego, California. I can see from where I sit in my office a company called Illumina. And they were the first to make genetic sequencing sort of universally available. They figured out how to do it in less than a day. At the time, it could take weeks to get your sample processed and sequenced. And they figured out how to do it for $100 or $100 as opposed to $10,000. So genetic sequencing, molecular diagnostics were now a realistic option for patients in many places around the world. How many of you, can you show me your wrists? How many of you are being monitored as we speak? Heart rates go up, heart rates go down. Now I actually get a report about the timing in between the beats, and all sorts of interesting measures that I didn't know I should care about, along with a little bit of health literacy about why I should care about these things. So we are making changes. If you're in the U.S. and you're like me, you carry your phone, your whole medical record is now stored in your phone. It can be shared. It can be viewed by anybody that I choose. This is a step forward. When I began my work in the Digital Innovation Lab at Pfizer, I used to talk about some great work that was happening in London, where patients would come in, they would have a retina scan, and a machine was reading the scan and looking for signs of retinopathy. In years past, if you had exhibited signs of retinopathy at the time of the scan, it may or may not matter, because typically it would take weeks for the scan to be read. This one hospital in one city in the world was working in a pilot program to see if they could change that, because every patient that went home was a patient that was slowly losing their vision without an intervention. But now you had machines that could do that. And so they were working on how do you make that real for patients? Today, they're doing that very thing in major cities all around the world. It's exciting stuff. So we're seeing the change, and of course, internally at Pfizer, we're very proud of our ability to run clinical trials. We have tens of thousands of patients participating in trials on any given day. In years past, that required you to visit a physician or a clinical site. Increasingly now, we're looking at bringing the trial to you. You may never visit a clinical site. You may get a kit. You may get all sorts of instrumentation. You may get all sorts of information and never have to see a physician. What does this mean for us? Well, we're pretty excited about what we're already starting to see. So we're in an age now where we thought early intervention, the retinopathy example, was compelling. But now we're starting to see the potential for not only early intervention, but prevention altogether. So I know that there are folks here at the conference working on technologies, and you'll hear from a good example in Sidekick today on providing support for patients long before they develop the condition, steering them in such a way that they may never develop the condition and may never require more substantial treatment. So we're excited about that. We're also excited about the world of digital therapeutics. When I was last at a Frontiers conference, it was 2019, the Digital Supply Act had just been passed in Berlin or in Germany, and DIGAs were now a reality. We now have 35 or more DIGAs that have been approved. Pfizer's working on some of our own, and we're excited about that. This whole idea of software as medicine opens up a world, especially for patients, where access to medicine or access to a pill may not be realistic. And lastly, we are hopefully beginning to be in an age of massive personalization. If Amazon or Netflix can figure out what I want to watch on any given Monday, and versus a child in my family or my wife, you should be able to get that massive personalization in healthcare, and we believe we're starting to see it. So what's the problem, right? The problem is we're awash in invention, but of course, invention on its own isn't what we're after, right? We're after innovation. We're after change. And change only comes when you take that invention and you figure out how to facilitate adoption. That's when you get the change, and that's the innovation that we can get excited about. Otherwise, we're talking about innovation theater. It feels good at the time to talk about, but you leave the room and it really hasn't changed. It hasn't brought the impact that it could. So what do we do about it? Pfizer's an 80,000 colleague strong organization. We have sites around the world. That should be a good thing, right? I don't know if some of you may have tried to do work with Pfizer in the past. It's not easy. Typically, you have to call all 80,000 of us to figure out what means something for us, right? What are our challenges? What are those impacts that we're most interested in making? So what we did is we created a network. First was a global innovation lab, and this was the focal point. So for internal organizations who believed that they had an opportunity that could be satisfied with a digital disruption. And so we provided them a place to go, places where they knew that they had an issue with patient access, but they didn't, and they knew that technology might be able to help overcome that access challenge, but they didn't have a partner to help figure out how to do it. And then externally, we provided a focal point so that you didn't have to call all 80,000 of us, that you could understand what was meaningful to, what meaningful challenges we were facing, what were the things that we believe were going to be critical in terms of change in healthcare in 2022, 23, 24, 25, and the expertise to engage with us to truly understand how you might fit in helping solve that challenge. And so we've had a nice run for three or so years, but it really is powerful when we figure out how to leverage our scale. So as I mentioned, Pfizer is engaged around the world. We're also very proud of the way we leverage that in the form of a healthcare hub network. So each of these marks on the screen here are examples of where we have colleagues engaged in digital health, whether it be Singapore, Sydney, Shanghai, or San Diego. Actually, I don't think we have San Diego up there. We should. We have an opportunity to leverage our scale and do something pretty special. So our healthcare hubs are our opportunity to develop a presence in a particular location, to engage with innovators in that location, to understand what's happening. So, you know, we were fascinated by the activity in Berlin a few years ago. We're always excited about technology coming out of Singapore. There's just such richness to what's happening in the environment today, and this is our ability to try to harness some of that. So we have experts or colleagues that focus their time on understanding who's active in different locations, what capabilities and what sort of centers of excellence they're developing around the world, whether it's image analysis, speech analysis, different digital tools for patient support. AI for drug discovery, for instance, in Tel Aviv is a hot topic these days. And this is our way to tap into that. And what we can do is then also, through our network, be able to deliver into those locales our innovation agenda, those challenges that we think are most important to us and to the patients that we serve, and we can bring those together. So it allows innovators in Berlin to understand what's important to a scientist in Boston, or a medical organization in Shanghai leveraging an innovation in diagnostics in Sydney. So this network is our way of leveraging our scale and really bringing the global to the local and the local to the global. And so it's been pretty successful and something we're really proud of, and you're going to hear an example of what that looks like in the real world in just a moment. Generally, we work in three areas when we talk about innovation. From a digital perspective, we talk about expanding drug discovery capabilities. I don't know if any of you saw some of the talks this morning on this subject, but the world of AI and machine learning has opened up our understanding of biology. So Pfizer just made an announcement of a relationship with a company called Cytoreason based in Israel. They were one of the first to really harness some of the latest thinking around AI, and some of the same algorithms that power autonomous vehicles are helping us understand biology and understanding laying out a map to understand what happens at a genetic level to go from genotype to phenotype. So to really understand biology at a depth that we've never understood. What that does is it unlocks opportunities for medicines. And what we can do then is bring those new ideas forward and faster than ever before. The challenge is then, how do you turn them into medicines? How do you turn an idea, a scientific hypothesis, into a medicine? In that world and in drug development, it can take as long as 8 or 9 years to develop even a very successful therapy. our challenge is how do we bring digital to shorten that? And we've seen some demonstrable successes, especially lately. Sometimes it's reaching patients where they are. If you've participated in a clinical trial, it's likely because you sought that clinical trial out because you were faced with a diagnosis that you were trying to understand and trying to treat. What we're doing now is partnering with different organizations to be able to bring the trial to the patient and make you more aware as a patient of where you might benefit from a trial perspective or be able to participate. Similarly, we turn this same kind of capability inwards. So some of you are likely familiar with our vaccines activity. You might ask, well, how are, typically in years past, it would take 4 or 5 years to develop a vaccine. How did you work on this COVID vaccine so quickly? Part of it was technology. There are some highly operational and administrative work in checking data and preparing documents. All of that used to be done in a very traditional human-intensive way, and we've brought AI to it. So even with the COVID vaccine, we were very pleased to take something that used to take months and reduce it down to days just from an administrative task. So it's been rewarding to see digital innovation at all levels. The most rewarding and perhaps of most interest to folks here today is what we've been doing in terms of patient outcomes and how we've been able to bring digital tooling and digital solutions to improve patient outcomes and really maximize the benefit of traditional therapies. In terms of what we do there, and I'm going to turn the floor over to our panel in just a moment, but I wanted to give people some sense of the breadth of what we're looking at. So we believe the opportunity starts very early on with different ways to increase awareness and personalize an experience. So infectious disease is a great example. How do we make sure that patients are aware of their risks and their personalized risk profile? We've done some very interesting work there, and it's interesting. And when you have a pandemic, it's particularly relevant to a large group of people. But it's even more relevant at times for very small groups of people. So you'll see lots and lots of examples in the rare disease space where it could take as long as 7 years or more for a diagnosis of a rare disease that a health system may not see very frequently, but you as a patient are exhibiting all of the characteristics that correlate with the potential for a diagnosis. They're just not seeing it. So how can we bring some of the power of AI and some of the data, not just in your community, but from communities around the globe, to increase that awareness and dramatically shorten that time to diagnosis, which could in fact have real material impact on a patient's life. In the diagnosis space, we've done lots of work with companies like FiberCheck or Fitbit. We've done work with Google. And a lot of it is focused most recently in the space of atrial fibrillation. So you've got a condition that's underdiagnosed. You have a significant research would indicate that 1 out of every 5 patients, or 1 out of every 5 people who are suffering from atrial fibrillation will never go diagnosed, and the outcomes can be significant. Right? In that case, you've got a probability of stroke, which is significant. And if you or people you care about have ever suffered from a stroke, you know how damaging that can be. We see it in treatment, so we were very proud of our work in the digital therapeutic space, but we also have all sorts of novel programs that are increasing access to our therapies, and in the US, and the topic of financial toxicity and trying to understand some of the other aspects around access and challenges for patients, we believe we can address via technology. The last bit is around adherence and disease management. So many of you have probably felt this personally. I know I certainly have. You've got a specific treatment which may or may not be the complete solution, right? So how do we support the whole patient? It's not just a condition, it's a patient, and how do we develop a more complete solution for patient support, and not just in the form of a pamphlet. but real-time guidance, real-time advice to improve your outcomes as a patient and really maximize the opportunity that therapies can provide. That's where we're going to focus the bulk of the discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague John Gordon and his special guests, Jürgen and Otley, to give you some information on what this looks like in the real world. John, take it away.
Thanks, Josh, and good afternoon, everyone. We're going to spend some time now talking about one of our partnerships that we've had in place for a number of years. And hopefully what we can do for you today is to bring some insight into the pros and cons of those partnerships, how they're adding value to patients, because all of this stuff is irrelevant. All of this kind of innovation and finding partnerships is irrelevant unless we're actually translating those partnerships into real value for patients. So I want to introduce you to my colleagues, Jürgen, and my partner, Otley. Take a seat, guys, and we're going to go into a bit of a discussion. Can we have the slide up, please? So let's start by introducing yourself. So, Otley, do you want to just tell me a little bit about what your role is and a little bit about Sidekick?
Yes, absolutely. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. My ask of the crowd here is that we try to keep this as dynamic as possible. We love questions, especially in a forum like this. My name is Otley Knudsen. I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Sidekick Health. We are a developer of digital therapeutics. We focus mostly on four clinical tracks: in adherence, cardiometabolic health, inflammation, and mental health. And we apply those across different populations in oncology, CVRM, I&I, and neurology. So it is a comprehensive approach. And we've been working like John says, with Pfizer now going on 4 years. Been a very interesting partnership, so I'm very happy to be here today. Pleasure to meet you.
Thanks, Otley. And Jürgen?
So, can you hear me well? Yeah. So my name is Jürgen Haug. I'm from Pfizer, as John already introduced. I'm about 20 years in pharma and in healthcare, always looking at technology. In the last 6 years, my focus was to work with global brand teams and leaders in therapeutic areas to look how we can implement technology solutions to support or even enhance their strategies. So, and one focus point is, of course, what can we do really to support patients, not only with the traditional work with our medicines, also beyond that with health solutions. And this is, I think, where we started to engage through the healthcare hubs with partners like Sidekick.
Thanks, Jürgen. So perhaps we'll start. Oh, go on.
And I think we have been, I think, quite successful with a lot of experiments. And we are also able to scale some of those. And this undermines also, I think, where I'm now in my role. Because I've moved recently to enterprise product management. So that means we are focusing for employee services, for HCP services, but also for patient services, more on a product perspective, making sure that those things that we really want to make successful, we treat as products and not as individual projects, and then are able really to have a product life cycle and to scale. As we have heard, we are working in more than 150 countries, and it's great to have something in one country, but it really moves the needle if you can scale in multiple countries. And I think that's where we see a big opportunity for scaling if you really treat this kind of digital health solutions as real products.
Great stuff. So, I mean, staying with you, Jürgen, then, maybe you can give us a little bit of background around what we were trying to achieve with the partnership.
So, I think, first of all, our motivation was really to provide medicines and outcomes to patients, really to improve their lives. I would like to take a look at the operating model physicians and a lot of people know, right? They know pharmaceutical companies as companies that heavily invest in drug discovery and research to bring products to the markets for the benefit of patients. They know us as well as companies that create a lot of data with clinical trials and others, and then use this data to have scientific field force teams that then go to the HCPs, to the hospitals, to the doctor's office to explain this data and then find the right patient for these new medicines, right? But there is a kind of a change right now, because what we see is that HCPs are getting more and more busy, right? We have elderly populations, they have more patients, they have a lot of administration, so the model does not really work that well anymore in some countries, because there's just not really the time to get all this information. On the other hand, when you look from a patient perspective, they have also not enough time potentially to support the patient as they would like to do. So what we see that there is a need and a demand from HCPs really to help to educate patients on their lifestyle, because it could help them to get better outcomes at the end. But it's just a problem with the timing, because if you see a patient once every 3 months, then you focus on the pure medical conditions, and there's not really time to focus on the other things. And this is actually where we believe we can help. And what we really would like to test, and also with Sidekick, is saying, can we provide a digital health service to patients that can prove it improves outcomes? And then, if we can do this, we can later on include this in our operating model. Because at the moment, it's very much physician-driven, field force-driven. But if you can generate this data and make this really real, we would be able to be seen also with our partners, not potentially as a supplier of medicines and pills, really as a valuable partner in the healthcare ecosystem, also providing service offerings.
So Jürgen, we're a massive organization with lots of resources at our fingertips. Why didn't we build it ourselves? Why were we looking for a partnership?
I think our incentive was we wanted to get really a motivated group of people that have already a solution, that have done this before, and so that we can act very quickly, right? Because we were at that stage, we like to do experiments, and we would like to be quick to the market and prove that we can get success. So that was more or less the reason why we went outside and we leveraged our healthcare hub to find the right partners.
And perhaps can you just talk a little bit about how we went about finding the right partner and how we selected them?
I think, first of all, we had a very clear indication what we would like to achieve for a specific patient population in inflammation and immunology. So we did extensive patient research, looked what is the patient journey, what are the patient needs, and what are the unmet patient needs. And based on that, we worked with the Health Hub in Finland and with an accelerator vertical to really do a first selection of the companies that might fit into this need and we could partner with. I think there are a whole lot of companies, and we then went to a selection. But then I think what was very important, at least as important as the technology and the services offering, was the mindset. So we really looked at a partner that is really has the same mindset and really would like to improve the patient outcomes with their tools, and not just having something as a marketing campaign, right? And so we looked at that. We had the discussions with Sidekick. We also saw that we can work together strategically. I think it was always about what we would like to achieve and not about how we do it. We knew from the beginning there will be a lot of challenges because we saw ourselves as pioneers, so this was not done before, by us at least. And we were confident that we can overcome challenges together with a common mindset.
Thanks, Jürgen. I remember being part of that, that first pitch session, and it's incredible to be on stage now after many years, you know, of the partnership. But Atli, coming to you, so you obviously heard about the challenge that Pfizer was putting out there. What made you at Sidekick think you could potentially help us solve this problem?
I think kind of very early on, and we're talking back in 2017, 2018, I mean, it wasn't obvious that what we had been doing as a company would translate over into I&I. And I think kind of the work that we did fairly early on in actually understanding unmet needs. I mean, in inflammation immunology, it's different across different conditions, but in ulcerative colitis, in Crohn's disease, what the physician is focused on is the disease and disease control. It is not kind of the shame and the social isolation, all the mental factors that surround these conditions that are just very, very tough. So that was the hypothesis that we built on. I think we got there relatively quickly and efficiently, but we were also piggybacking on a lot of very, very good research and work that had already been done within Pfizer. So I think we came to that realization early. It was actually quite important for us as a company that our therapeutic area tracks or our therapeutic stem cells, they can be translated over from kind of a traditional application, maybe in CVRM, and into oncology, into inflammation immunology. We always have to be fairly specific about how we apply those and how we combine those. But I think that's the confidence that we got as an organization.
And you were quite a small company when we first met.
Arguably, we are still.
Yeah, in comparison, maybe, yeah. But, you know, what excited you about a partnership with Pfizer? What could you see, you know, that we could bring to a partnership to help you guys?
It's like I was, honestly, I was surprised by how honest the focus was on outcomes and actually on doing something beyond the pill. It's like helping people more holistically. That to me has been a real strength in the partnership. I think also kind of this agreement that what we do, it has to be anchored in science. Science will win. We have to take a scientific approach to this. We have to clinically validate what we do. It isn't just about engagement or providing something that's fun. It is about actually being able to demonstrate that you are having an impact with life science grade quality. I think the last thing that we've always been excited about is the reach and the amplification of what we're doing together, the access to patients, to physicians, to KOLs, to patient advocacy groups. This reach is needed, and I mean, you know, arguably still a small company. We're 200 people today. I think we were 12 when we started working together, and even at 200, I mean, you know, we can't get to the reach that Pfizer can, and our other partners as well. So I think those things primarily.
Thank you. Jürgen, turning to you. You know, back then, this was probably one of our first digital health partnerships. What challenges did we face, or did you face in standing this up in the first place?
Yeah, I think very good question, and it's great my flight got cancelled, so we can have a full session for tomorrow on that, but we can also do it a little bit shorter. I think we knew when we started that there are challenges in front of us because nobody knew what exactly to do, how to maneuver the process, how to do the contracting, what questions might come up. And to be honest, it was quite, I would say, straightforward when we started, easier than expected, because we started in Finland, right? we started with the first pilots there. It was quite easy to get a contract in place. We looked at what are the compliance stuff, what can we do from a data privacy perspective, is the solution deemed to be a software medical device, and these boxes got ticked, I think, quite quickly. I think quickly when it comes to a pharmaceutical company and their operating model, but it was okay. I think where it got really tricky and complex is when we started to scale in different dimensions, because after seeing that it could work, right, we started with new indications. So we had rheumatoid arthritis, then we looked in IBD, then we looked specifically in UC, then we got to other markets as well, right? Then we said, okay, we have a program that is for patients that we with no two-way communication between a health coach and the patient, and there is another version. And then going to different countries and to different stakeholders, you see that it's not easy to navigate. And I also believe this is something we underestimated a little bit, because we made it really clean from a country perspective, but then adding all these different aspects. And then sometimes if you come with the fifth different approach that you try to implement, even your own compliance guy saying, is this not the same? What is the difference? And then I think it gets really, really complex, and then you need to think about what is an approach that we can take above country and how we can get everything aligned. And I think this was a little bit tricky, but I think we still got a good solution, because what we did from the beginning, I think we were not blind, right? We had a cross-functional team with medical, with commercial, with legal, with compliance, with analytics people, of course with Sidekick. And we looked into that and said, okay, what are all the boxes that we need to tick? Discussed early, even before we signed the contract, right, which is great. And then we kept more or less this cross-functional team, and we are still working with them for all the new indications, for the new program that we are now doing for atopic dermatitis. So, we go farther and farther with the functionalities, with the countries, so it's getting increasingly complex. But I think with this cross-functional team approach that we also apply in the markets to have the market regulations covered, I think we can overcome those challenges.
What I've loved to see about this example is the sort of iteration. So we have truly taken an innovative sort of agile approach. So as the indications have grown, we've probably taken the learnings from the last one that we've done and brought it on to the next one. So yeah, thank you. So Atli, what do you think you've been able to achieve at Sidekick that perhaps you couldn't have done without the partnership?
I think I'll come back to like how I was discussing your first question. I think it is this continued translation of how we can, as partners, meet a very, very real unmet need for patients. It requires a scientific approach. And also then the amplification and the market access that we get through the partnership. Yeah. And I think it's very exciting that we've been able to demonstrate that we can start in one country, we can start in one condition, and then we can actually scale. I absolutely want to second what Jürgen is saying. I mean, you know, sometimes it has been a real hot mess, but we do figure it out, because we don't have this view of the partnership being binary in success. Is it working or is it not? It's always different elements. Some things are not working. We tried to have the agility and the flexibility to go back then and fix what needs to be fixed, but we continue with what's working. I think that is quite remarkable, actually. Kind of an organization that is 200 people, an organization that's 80,000, kind of a scale-up that is a little bit chaotic, and kind of a global enterprise that is very, very strict, very formal, obviously highly regulated. And how you can find a way. There has to be a lot of like-mindedness in the equation.
Great.
I think that always helps, right? I think during such a program or several programs, you always struggle, right? There are so many things, but then sometimes it's good to meet face to face, to have a strategy meeting, to have a beer together or a glass of wine and really rethink again what you want to achieve, and then problems get solved much easier than just going to problem by problem in a formal way.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on what you said earlier on, which is one of the sort of criterias that we were looking for in the partnership was that we had sort of similar outlook on things and that we had sort of like-minded individuals, because you are definitely going to encounter barriers and challenges along the way, and having that kind of strong relationship, I think, really helps you sort of overcome some of those barriers. I want to sort of, we've been talking about the advantages of partnerships, and obviously over the last day, we've been hearing about how pharma's a great partner in some of these situations, but we're probably also a terrible partner in some cases too. So what do you think you could have achieved without us that you know, if you hadn't have had that partnership, what could you have done differently?
Yeah, a terrible partner, no.
All right.
Nothing is again, it's never black or white. Obviously, we understand that you're in such a regulated space that, you know, we can't bring a cowboy mentality and just expect everything to move super quick and all that. Especially as we start to scale, right? If you're doing a pilot in 1 or 2 countries, you know, you're kind of able a little bit to go under the radar, but when you start to scale and this becomes bigger, then, you know, I think all the things kick in, right? I don't think we would have wanted to take a different path. If, you know, I was here and we were looking back in hindsight and saying, no, it was a terrible success. It was not a success, but it was like a terrible failure, then I probably would have a different perspective. Yeah. But we are in the middle of the river, right? And we see the path forward, so we'll continue to take the path forward. I don't think we would have chosen a different path. This is the path that we are taking. There's some stuff that we're doing kind of with other partners. We're working with large health insurers in the US. We're looking at DIGA, we're looking at FDA. We're looking at kind of different paths to market, but I think that's more of an internal balancing act of saying, you know, these are different channels, these are different partners. We have our development portfolio that we're navigating through. So it's more like we're finding balance across different channels. That's tricky.
Yeah, Jürgen, what do you think you would do differently if you were going through this whole process again?
I think, once again, we were pioneering, right? And unfortunately, we didn't have a crystal ball, right? So, but I think, and we did a lot of things right from the beginning. And what I would think about if I could go 2 years back and start again, is saying potentially really doing a better analysis of the market environments before scaling. Because what we have seen, there are of course things like legal or compliance laws that are local. Even if you have GDPR and all of that stuff, there are still local nuances or a lot of local interpretations, but also what are really the regulations, how can you promote something? In some markets, it's a little bit more open. In some markets, it's very regulated. You need to go through different channels. Sometimes you can go directly to the physicians, you can go to the patient organizations or different channels. And then also, I think, what are really the key stakeholders in the market when it comes to KOLs, patient organizations, that can potentially make and break a successful implementation. Because if you approach somebody who is really important and they have just their own other solution that is quite similar, even if your one's is better, it doesn't help, right? They will not support you. And I think this kind of analysis is something that I thought would have been better to do, I think, a little bit deeper. I think we did it, but I think that we could improve doing it, I think, in more detail, really to understand exactly what boxes we need to tick in which market to make it really a success.
So you talked about a crystal ball. thinking about the future, you know, how do you think these kind of partnerships are going to evolve in the future? And I'm not talking specifically about Pfizer Sidekick, I'm talking about just generally these kind of partnerships in digital health.
I think it's that's a very real thing, because kind of I see a considerable difference today in how different companies actually are collaborating. It's not just kind of this fluffy ecosystem concept, but it's actual real collaborations that we're having with different partners to help deliver into third parties, working with different partners within Pfizer. Some of these are represented here in the room as well. So I think kind of that's the concreteness that I see happening. It's no longer just a fluffy ecosystem concept, but actual tangible collaborations to solve specific things. I think that's pretty exciting. That brings a different set of challenges. How do you contract? How do you think about IP? How do you think about all these different kinds of things? It also brings to me something that is an even bigger challenge, and that is sort of how far into the ecosystem do you actually reach? If you think about a patient unmet need, is not just prescribing the right medication or the right digital therapeutic, it's also about care gaps. It's also about access to healthcare. It's also about kind of access to the right kind of foods or the right kind of, so it's like, where do you stop? How far into the ecosystem do you reach? I think that's becoming more of a question now, but I'm very excited about more partnering and more open kind of collaborative innovation. And it's not just fluff, it's real tangible things that are happening.
Jürgen, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I fully agree, right? I think these partnerships are getting more and more important, but I think also what I believe we have tried it several times, having one partner and try to whatever, roll this out independently. Who else would like to do that is potentially not the right way. So I believe as well we need to have this ecosystem of partnerships that we have. On one hand, of course, if we go to a market entrance, so we need to align with the HCPs, with organizations, with patient organizations, different potentially service providers to have a more holistic service offering for a patient. And then I think from a technology perspective, I also believe we will hopefully more go to a platform approach, right? Because what we see at the moment, we have 5,000 apps, health apps in App Store, or whatever, how many we have, right? But everything is trying to solve a single problem. And then we have, for each of those apps, a calendar function, a mood tracker, whatever, and everybody is doing the same thing. One is doing a little bit better, other is a little bit worse. And I think really to look from a patient-centric perspective, I think we need, as an industry as well, say we need to create an ecosystem where we can provide a more holistic, personalized solution where we fit different things together, right? And I think that's also the reason why we in Pfizer are looking at products right now, and what I'm going to do is looking at a product group for digital health companions and look how can we combine services, measurement, architecture to make this more flexible for reuse. And I think one example might be one company, startup, will have the best service for mood tracking or for improving sleep for patients. This is something that you find in oncology as a problem for patients, in immunology, in so many areas. If you come to a platform approach, why should this company develop a whole app and try to bring this to so many markets? They can come to us, we put it in the overall offering, in the platform approach, and we can scale this immediately in a lot of countries because we have digital companion solutions in a lot of countries that are used already for a lot of patients. And I think this is a model I see would benefit the patients. Potentially it's a little bit out, but at least we are trying to start to work on that.
Great. I'm going to go off script. I'll go on quick. Go on.
Just to second that, and I think kind of what Jürgen is talking about is almost two different perspectives to the same thing. One is around managing the technological complexity. It doesn't make any sense to have 5,000 patient support programs. They're not talking together. It's all in siloed infrastructure. That's like the technology management part of it. Then if you look at this from the patient perspective, there's just this whole fact of polychronicity, of multichronicity. That singular person that is battling type 2 diabetes is probably also battling congestive heart failure and rheumatoid arthritis. So are you going to approach them with 3 different point solutions, asking them to do the same thing? You have to take a holistic approach.
Great stuff. So very quickly, because we've only got a couple of minutes left, I was going to go off script and just ask you to give some advice to any startup that's wanting to partner with a big pharma. What would you say to them?
I'll go first. It's going to be a very controversial perspective. Make it as little early on, while you're figuring out what works and what doesn't work, make it as little about the money, make the money as little of an issue as possible, and kind of the contract almost as vague as possible. Because the only thing you know when you're starting, you are going to get things wrong. And when you do a contract, you lock in certain things, and it's very hard to go back. So keep it flexible when you start.
Great. And Jürgen? The other way round. So what advice would you give a big pharma company wanting to partner with startups?
I think, of course, the solution and the offering that this startup has should fit, right? I think it needs to fit into the therapeutic areas you are in. You need to fit into the strategy. It needs to fill a gap that you don't have, right? Or need to be better than a service that you already have. But then I think the key is really the way how you set a common goal, and you not only on a paper, on a PowerPoint, you really need to believe in a common goal, and you need to test this with the people you are going to work with. But it will, if you do this, it shouldn't be for experiment, it should be for a longer journey, and then you need to have people in the organization you can trust and believe in, and you can be sure that you are not, whatever, getting to court for minor things, right? And because we are pioneers, we are going to the unknown, we have issues, we need to have the trust that we solve it together, and I think that's the key thing. And I think what I would like to mention as well, and everybody knows it, I believe, we are just at the beginning of the journey, right? And like when we look at the rockets that are flying to the moon, right? So, and it takes time, it's a process to implement something, but also to make it be used by patients and HCPs. But a good thing is, I think we are going in a good pace, right? And it really will benefit the patients. And what I always think about, so I have a chronic disease, right? My father and my mother, they are over 80s, they still have a chronic disease. My son has a disease, or sometimes, and what we are doing is not just for patients or people or whatever. We are the people, right? You're myself, my father, my son, my friends, my loved ones, right? So, and that's, I think, one reason why we should keep pushing, right?
That's great, thank you. So thinking long term and keeping contracts vague. They're the takeaways. So thank you for staying with us and listening to some of those insights around that partnership. I just want to hand over to, well, first of all, say thank you to Atli and Jürgen for sharing those insights.
Any questions?
We haven't got time for questions.
Oh, really? Okay.
We need to move
Cover
on.
it after.
No, we need to bring Jim up to the stage just to close the session. So Jim, please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, John, Adley, and Jürgen. So before I close, again, that was a great example of how we collaborate based on capturing opportunities that have high patient impact and then matching them to really innovative companies so we can first pilot and then scale. This is a repeatable model that we have scaled now into global clinical supply. So there, I run an innovative sciences accelerator program that starts really with an opportunity tracker, or in a sense, a funnel, where we take ideas from all of our colleagues all around the world, and then we pair them with external innovations that we find from either startups or academic institutions, with the goal, really, of, again, helping accelerate our clinical trials. We also run innovation challenges, and oh, is there a clicker? There we go. Awesome. Okay. So these challenges we publish on what we have Breakthrough Change Accelerator website. You can see that fairly large QR code there if you want to go to that. The last challenge we posted over the summertime was focused on prediction and assessment and continuous improvement of medication adherence for clinical trials. Now, you may ask, okay, why are we doing medication adherence if we're a supply organization? But being able to predict a patient's adherence risk based on where they are in the trial, and also being able to send interventions to those patients so they don't drop off the trial, really is directly correlated to the supply chain optimization and making sure that we have the right supply at the sites at the right time. And our scouting here was a combination of our relationships we have with startups and with VCs, and also collaborating with our external healthcare hub network that Josh spoke to earlier. So we can have that, that kind of deep dive into tapping into the local ecosystems across the world. And also our strategic partners such as Plug and Play and SOSV's China Accelerator. And the result of this, what we discovered, is really a lot of advances in specifically digital medication adherence that has computer vision, which can do a lot of detection in multiple modalities, as well as deep analytics to help with that prediction. Our winner was AI Cure, which has a brilliant platform that does both of these very well. And the Ardex group came in as our runner-up because they have an extensive ecosystem of connected devices and connected smart packaging, so we can do that passive monitoring. So, at the risk of getting the hook for being over, I'd just like to say thank you very much, and hope you have a better understanding now of how Pfizer does digital innovation. And let's keep this conversation going. So, thank you all.